Ashes of the Soul Forged, Chapter 1, Part 2. As observed by me, Valis of the Quiet Accord. I should have withdrawn then. The primary event had concluded. The intervention was complete. The boy's transformation from mortal to something other had been accomplished. By the laws that bound me, my observation should have ended. Instead, I followed. It was not rebellion, not exactly. The Quiet Accord permits observation of consequences, of ripple effects, of how divine intervention spreads through mortal reality like ink through water. I was simply being thorough. That this thoroughness happened to align with my interest in the boy's choices was merely coincidence. Oakhaven at night was a different creature than during the day. Shadows pooled in corners where honest work happened when the sun watched. Alleys that seemed quaint became maze-like. The familiar became foreign, transformed by darkness and the knowledge that safety was an illusion the dark didn't respect. Edrin moved through it like he'd been born to it. Mar's memories provided knowledge of patrol routes. Voss's discipline offered silence and purpose. Rawn's experience suggested where a frightened soldier might run. But underneath the stolen skills, something else guided him. A pressure, a pull. Like iron filings toward a magnet, he oriented himself toward Orin without conscious thought. The blade knew where its next meal was. The alleys of Oakhaven were not kind to strangers. They twisted without reason, narrowed without warning, dead-ended without apology. What looked like a through passage by day became a trap by night. Walls pressed close enough to scrape shoulders. Refuse piles forced sudden turns. Washing lines crossed overhead like webs, waiting to catch the unwary. Orin learned this quickly. His flight from the forge had been powered by pure terror. He'd seen gods walk. He'd seen the dead rise. He'd seen his sergeant, unkillable Rawn, who'd survived 3 wars, carved apart by a boy who'd been corpse-cold minutes before. Training said to report. Terror said to run. Terror won. But terror is a sprint, not a marathon. It burns bright and burns out, leaving exhaustion and confusion in its wake. Orin slowed, then stopped, then tried to think. The barracks were northeast, or was it northwest? The village that had seemed so small, so controllable from the position of armed authority, became a labyrinth when you were alone and afraid in it. Every corner could hide the impossible. Every shadow might hold a blade that drank souls. His third wrong turn brought him face to face with a wall of crumbling brick. He spun, backtracked, chose another passage. This one narrowed until he had to turn sideways to continue. His sword caught on something. Wood, metal, he couldn't tell in the dark, and the sound rang out like an accusation. Behind him, not close but not far enough, came footsteps. Not running, not hurrying, just following. Steady, patient, inevitable. Orin pushed through the narrow passage and emerged into a slightly wider alley. A dead cat lay against one wall, its decay perfuming the air with sweet rot. He gagged, stumbled past it, trying to orient himself. The outpost was east? No, north. North and east. But which way was north in this maze? The footsteps continued, neither closer nor farther, as if his pursuer knew exactly how much distance to maintain. As if this was not a chase, but a lesson in inevitability. Stop, Orin called out, his voice cracking on the word. 19 years old, and he sounded like the child he'd never really stopped being. Just stop. The footsteps paused, then resumed. Orin ran. Not well, not wisely. Fear made him clumsy, and the alleys punished clumsiness. He barked his shin on an unseen crate, the pain sharp enough to bring tears. His shoulder slammed into a corner he'd misjudged, spinning him half around. His breathing came in wheezes that echoed off the closed walls, advertising his position to anyone listening. Left, right, a passage that might lead somewhere, another dead end, back, try again. And always, those patient footsteps behind. Finally, inevitably, Oren chose wrong one time too many. The alley he ducked into was broader than most, almost a proper street, but it ended in a courtyard barely 6 paces across, surrounded by walls too high to climb. Someone's private space, accessed through doors he had no keys for. A perfect trap, sprung by his own desperation. He spun back toward the entrance. Edrin stood there. The boy, but was he still a boy? Blocked the only exit with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world. Sorrow's edge hung loose in his hand, its gem pulsing with heart rhythm light. In the dark of the alley, that red glow painted everything in shades of blood and shadow. "Please," Oren said. The word came out small, worthless, a coin too debased to purchase anything. Edrin tilted his head. The motion was almost curious, as if he was trying to remember what please meant, what mercy looked like, what it had felt like to be the one begging while others decided his fate. "You ran," Edrin observed. His voice carried echoes now. His own youth layered with the experience of dead men. "When they killed my family, you stood back. And when the god came, you ran." "I didn't. I tried to stop them. I said she was just a child." "You said it, once, quietly. Then you let it happen." Oren's hand went to his sword, then fell away. What was the point? He'd seen what the thing in Edrin's hand could do. Seen how it made a master swordsman out of a blacksmith's boy. Seen how it drank down lives like wine. "I was scared," Oren admitted. "I'm still scared. I've been scared since I put on this uniform. I never wanted any of this." "Neither did I." Edrin took a step forward. Oren took one back, pressing against the dead-end wall. "I wanted to make things. Beautiful things. Useful things. Things that lasted longer than the moment of their use." The gem in Sorrow's edge flared brighter. The blade was hungry. It had been minutes since its last feeding, and minutes were eternities to appetite like that. "But they took that from me," Edrin continued. "Took my father, my mother, my sister, my life, my choices. Everything except this." He raised the blade slightly. "This thing that makes me less than human and more than dead. This gift I never wanted from a god I never prayed to." "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." Oren's voice broke completely. He was crying now, tears carving clean tracks through dirt and fear sweat. "We just wanted respect. We just wanted them to stop looking at us like we were monsters." "So you became monsters, to prove them wrong?" "Yes. No. I don't know." Oren slid down the wall until he was sitting in the alley filth, all pretense of soldier's dignity abandoned. "I just wanted to belong somewhere, to matter, to not be nobody from nowhere with nothing to show for it." Edrin studied him. In his inherited memories, he could see echoes of the same desperation. Mar's fear of being revealed as weak, Voss's terror of returning to chaos, Rawn's slow slide from protector to predator. All of them just people, broken in ordinary ways, who'd chosen to break others rather than fix themselves. The blade whispered suggestions. How easy it would be. One thrust, one more feast. One more set of memories and skills to add to his collection. Who knew what insights Oren might provide? What techniques? What knowledge? But beneath the whispers, beneath the hunger, beneath the cold mathematics of power and its acquisition, something else spoke. His father's voice. The tool serves the craftsman, never the other way around. Edrin lowered sorrow's edge. The blade's disappointment was a physical thing, a weight that tried to drag his arm back up, to complete the arc of violence that would feed its need. He fought it, muscle and will, against divine hunger, and for a moment the outcome was uncertain. Then he spoke, and the words made it real. Go. Oren blinked. What? Go. Back to the barracks. Tell them bandits attacked the forge. Tell them you're the only survivor. Tell them whatever lie keeps you breathing and them from asking questions. Edrin stepped aside, leaving the alley exit clear. Just go. They'll hunt you. Probably. Why spare me? Edrin looked at the blade in his hand. It pulsed sullenly, denied its feast, but already calculating future opportunities. Always hungry, always patient. Always waiting for the moment when principle would weaken enough to let appetite choose. Because I'm not this thing's slave, Fran, he said. Not yet, maybe not ever, and because you're just another tool they used badly. Breaking you won't fix what's broken. Oren stood slowly, as if sudden movement might change Edrin's mind. He edged toward the exit, never turning his back, never quite believing this was real. At the alley mouth he paused. Your sister, he said quietly. She was brave. Didn't cry, just watched, like she was trying to understand why the world had gone mad. Then he was gone, footsteps rapidly fading into the night. Edrin stood alone in the courtyard, sorrow's edge heavy in his hand. The blade was furious, not hot fury. It was too calculating for that. Cold fury, the kind that planned and waited and remembered. It had been promised a feast and been given fasting instead. You'll feed, Edrin told it, when I choose, on who I choose, for reasons I choose. That's the deal. Take it or find another wielder. The blade considered this. It could no more leave him than he could abandon it. They were bound now by divine will and spilled blood. But within that binding, there was room for negotiation, for compromise, for the slow corruption of principle by necessity. It settled into patience. Time was on its side. Every battle would require its strength. Every enemy would justify its hunger. Every choice would become easier than the last, until one day the boy would wake to find he'd become exactly what the blade had always intended. A perfect mechanism for delivering death. But that was the future's problem. Tonight, in this moment, Edrin had chosen to be more than appetite. It was a small victory, perhaps a temporary one, but it was his. I remained in Oakhaven as dawn broke, grey and reluctant, over a village that would never be quite the same. The quiet accord permitted observation of aftermath. It was, after all, educational. Mortals needed to see consequence to understand cause. They needed to trace the ripples to comprehend the stone. The baker's wife found them first. She'd come to commission bread pans. Brand's ironwork was particularly good for such things, holding heat evenly, lasting generations. Her scream broke the morning like poorly cast bronze, a sound that would echo in the village's memory for years to come. Others came running, the miller, the cooper, half a dozen families who had lived beside the forge for years, who had heard its rhythm so long they'd stopped noticing it until its silence became deafening. They stood at the door, looking in but not entering, as if crossing that threshold would make it real in ways that distant observation couldn't. They noticed its silence now. The scene they found defied easy understanding. 3 soldiers dead. That was clear enough. But the family too? And where was the boy? Why did the blood lead both in and out? Who had won? Who had survived? Who could have done this? Questions multiplied like morning shadows, each villager adding their own theory, their own fear, their own relief that it hadn't been their door the soldiers had chosen. When Jorik Pell arrived with a squad from the outpost, the questions only multiplied. 4 men had left the tavern. 3 lay dead. Orin had stumbled back near dawn, half mad with tales of bandits in the night, of an ambush at the forge, of barely escaping with his life. His story had holes. Why bandits would target a blacksmith, how they'd overcome trained soldiers where they'd gone. But it was easier to believe than the alternatives. Pell stood in the doorway, cataloguing death with the efficiency of a man who had seen too much of it. His ledger would record facts: 4 soldiers engaged in patrol. Bandit attack at the forge, 3 soldiers dead, civilian casualties, the blacksmith's family. 1 soldier survived. Bandits fled, likely toward the borderlands. Recommend increased patrols. Case closed. Order restored. Tragedy contained. He never mentioned the strange wounds on the soldiers that spoke of impossible swordsmanship. Never noted the absence of the decorative blade they'd been forging. Never questioned why a simple blacksmith's hammer was nowhere to be found. Never asked why the survivor's story changed slightly each time he told it. Details had a way of complicating clean reports, and Pell, like all good sergeants, understood that the best report was one that required no follow-up questions. By noon the bodies were removed. By evening the forge was stripped of valuable tools. Waste not, want not. By the next morning a notice was posted. The plot was available for lease, previous tenants having defaulted on their obligations to the Crown. Life in Oakhaven continued. It always did. But at night when the wind was right, villagers swore they could hear hammer song from the empty forge, a rhythm that spoke of patient making, of careful shaping, of iron remembering its purpose. They were wrong, of course. The forge was silent. But somewhere a hammer waited, hidden in that place between here and elsewhere, where observation had become indistinguishable from action, where a god of the quiet accord had bent the rules just enough to preserve what shouldn't be lost, and somewhere else a boy carried a blade that sang a different song entirely. Both were tools, both could shape the world. The question was not which would prove stronger. The question was whether the hand that had learned to use both would remember, when the time came, which one built and which one merely cleared the ground. I withdrew my observation as the last villager left the empty forge. My duty here was done. The boy was marked now, changed, set upon a path that would shake the foundations of order itself. Divine intervention had been observed. Mortal consequence had been catalogued. The great wheel of cause and effect had turned another degree. But I found myself lingering at the edges of perception, unwilling to fully disengage. Edrin had left Oakhaven before the sun rose, slipping away like smoke through the pre-dawn darkness. He'd chosen the wild roads, the paths between settlements, where a young man with a sword might be just another refugee from the border wars, where questions were few and trust was earned in blood. He would learn, in the days to come, the true weight of what he carried. Sorrow's edge would test him. Every battle would be a negotiation. Every death a temptation. Every victory would make the next killing easier. until the line between justice and hunger blurred beyond recognition. But he had already done something I had not thought possible. He had refused. In that moment of choice, when he could have fed the blade Oren's life and grown stronger for it, he had chosen mercy, not from weakness, not from fear, but from a determination to remain himself despite the weight of what he'd become. That refusal would echo. Small as it was, personal as it was, it had created a crack in the pattern of how such things were meant to unfold. Soul weapons consumed their wielders. That was their nature. That was their purpose. That was the cosmic balance that justified their existence. But Edrin had said no. And in that no, I heard the echo of his father's hammer, shaping something new from the raw material of tragedy. The quiet accord demanded I not interfere. It said nothing about hope, and so I hoped, quietly, carefully, within all prescribed boundaries, that when Edrin finally understood what he'd become, he would choose to be more than the sum of his deaths, that he would remember creation was harder than destruction, but infinitely more worthwhile, that somewhere in the balance between hammer and blade, between making and unmaking, he would find a third path. The well of souls turned in its eternal cycle. The Aurelian maintained their watch. The Varkals schemed in their hungry depths. Gods and mortals played out their ancient roles with the certainty of those who believed the script could never change. And between them all, a boy with a blade walked toward a destiny that none of us, not gods, not demons, not even the weapon itself, could fully predict. That uncertainty was terrifying to those who valued order above all else. That uncertainty was beautiful to those who understood that sometimes the world needed breaking before it could be properly remade. I was meant to be the former. The quiet accord had shaped me for observation without intervention, for recording without caring, for watching the patterns repeat endlessly without variation. But I had noticed the boy, and in noticing I had changed. Not greatly, not obviously, but enough. Enough to hope, enough to watch what came next with something more than divine indifference. Enough to wonder if perhaps the greatest act of creation was not in making things, but in making choices that defied the weight of what you were supposed to be. The story of Edrin the Smith had ended in blood and divine intervention. The story of Edrin Soulforged had begun with a single word. No. Everything that followed would turn on whether he could keep saying it, even when yes would be so much easier. Even when the blade sang its hungry song. Even when the world seemed to offer no choices but predator or prey. Even when the only thing standing between him and the monster he could become was the memory of a hammer's patient rhythm and a father's quiet faith that making was always harder, always better than breaking. That perhaps was the most terrifying thing of all. That perhaps was the most hopeful.
The story continues, as all stories must. Find the next chapter at Codex 11. Subscribe, lest the Forge's call go unheard. The Forge is patient, but it does not wait forever.